in some ways reductive, that may be too strong of a word, but simple and conceptions of how should an Islamic museum or an Islamic art exhibition look have been kind of static for a fair amount of time, really as a result of a certain narrative that has been built for a number of decades or maybe a century and a half. And what excites me about this Biennale and about what we can unleash is a total rethink of how do you build the narratives.
Welcome to a special edition of the afikra podcast, here live from the Islamic Arts Biennale. My name is Mikey Muhanna. I'm joined by two very special guests, His Excellency Rakan Altouq, the Vice Chair of the Diriyah Biennale Arts Foundation, as well as the Assistant Minister for Culture of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and Dr. Julian Raby, one of the Artistic Directors of the Islamic Arts Biennale. Welcome to you both, and thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Thank you, Mikey.
Your Excellency, let's start with the most obvious question, which is where are we sitting and why are we sitting here? Explain this tremendous place that we're sitting in.
Well, thank you, Mikey. Thank you for doing this. I'm really happy to be on afikra and with my good friend, Dr. Julian. We are in the Hajj terminal of Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. This very special place is now playing host for the second time to the Islamic Arts Biennale. This building is very, very special. There was a intentional choice to host an Islamic Arts Biennale here in 2023 and to make it really a home for this new platform that we want to, as the Diriyah Biennale Foundation, bring to the Islamic world and the world really at large. This building was completed in the early part of the 1980s. When completed, it was the largest roofed structure ever built by mankind.
Crazy.
Designed at that time by Fadlur Rahman Khan, an architect, a Bangladeshi-American architect with Skidmore Owens, with SOM, and designed for one purpose: to welcome millions of visiting pilgrims on their way to Mecca. Since decommissioned with the expansion of Jeddah's airport, at least this part, the Diriyah Biennale Foundation took the location over as a host for the Islamic Arts Biennale, first because of obviously spaciousness, beauty, a nod to the architectural history and creativity that really guided Fadl al-Rahman Khan's design. But also because this is a venue and a space that is really quite filled with the energy of Islam. Saudi Arabia's, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia's service to Islam through Hajj and playing host to the Hajj. His Majesty's official title is the custodian of the two holy mosques. Is not taken lightly by any of us as Saudi Arabia, but it has been an amazing journey for us to almost draw parallels to what we would like to do in the cultural realm around Islamic arts. So frankly, in the end, it was not only appropriate, but a no-brainer of a location to play host to this platform that we want to bring to the world.
It's funny, before we move on to the Biennale, just the idea, it's interesting, this idea of like the Hajj terminal. Some people listening to this who are sitting in Brussels or Tokyo or New York might not even know what that actually means. So like literally millions of pilgrims came through this terminal on their way to Hajj for a decade.
Exactly. And not only does it play a big part in the consciousness and memory of people who have come on pilgrimage, but even within the city of Jeddah, this is a very special architectural monument in a way. It's quite vast and large. You see it as you travel through Medina Road in Jeddah. So I remember having conversations 2 years ago with a lot of our visitors who basically feel an association with this building, either because their families have legacies of serving pilgrims when it's time for Hajj, or literally because they were driving by this massive tented structure and now have found a new way to visit it and experience being under these canopies for the purpose of arts and culture.
Dr. Julian, I cut you off. Tell me.
Yes, so I think that there's a double dynamic here. One is what you said the other day, that we are literally 93 kilometers from the birthplace of Islam. So that creates one dynamic. The other is that we're so close to what over millennia must have been one of the most international cities in the world, Jeddah, a place where everybody from the Maghrib to the Mashriq, from the west to the east, would congregate at least annually. So that actually sets up an incredibly powerful curatorial dynamic to be referencing the core of Islam, and at the same time the diversity and the cultural throughput, and so that's been an amazing mix. And then another factor which I think those of us working here feel subconsciously, this is a building of such excellence that it demands that we give our very, very best. I could imagine some of these buildings in another venue, and it wouldn't have that inspiring and aspirational kind of power to it. So I think those three elements make this a truly special place, don't you?
Yeah. Your Excellency, maybe let's give a sense to people who are listening. What's here? Like, I mean, people hear Islamic Arts Biennale, maybe they've never even attended a Biennale. Walk us through a little bit of the structure of this version in 2025, how it might be different than the first version, and what actually makes up this beautiful, this work.
Yeah, so this Biennale is the second edition of our Islamic Arts Biennale. It has evolved to a great degree, but essentially, and Dr. Julian has been really instrumental, him and the other artistic directors and curators, in bringing a vision really to life. So I'll leave space for Dr. Julian to take us into the depths of what is being done curatorially and what has been done. But this Biennale, this second edition, is essentially 7 components.
Yeah.
Each distinct, but each speaking to the brilliantly done theme that the artistic directors have come up with, which is وَمَا بَيْنَهُمَا, and all that is in between. The first section is ALBIDAYAH, which is our curated show, really focusing on the centrality of Islam's the book, the Quran, the Kaaba, and the holy objects of Mecca and Medina. The second is a second appearance of an initiative we had 2 years ago, which is ALMADAR. ALMADAR is our convening platform for institutions from the Islamic world, or interested in Islamic arts and Islamic history, even from outside the Islamic world. This year growing from 11 to 34 participating institutions from around the world. Then we go to the third section, ALMUQTANI, which is the collector in Arabic. ALMUQTANI is where this Biennale pays homage to 2 important art collections. The Furusiyya Art Foundation, established by Rif'at Sheikh Al-Ard, a Saudi national, and the Al-Thani collection of Sheikh Hamad bin Abdullah Al-Thani. We then go to, under these beautiful canopies, Al-Midalla, meaning the canopy, where our contemporary art installations are placed and installed. And then we have Al-Mukarrama and Al-Munawwara, again a continuation of our first edition, where we really zero in and focus on the special place that Mecca and Medina have as the 2 holy sites of Islam. And finally, and really very excitingly this year, we have our 7th category, which is Al-Musalla, or the prayer space. Al-Musalla is an architectural competition that was an initiative of the Diriyah bin Ali Foundation that briefed or requested proposals, 100 of which came in, to design a new form of prayer space to be installed as a pavilion within this Biennale, and to have within its proposal and concept an idea of what will its afterlife be. This year, a very really esteemed jury chaired by Prince Nawaf bin Ayyaf shortlisted 5 proposals and chose a winning proposal by a combination of artist Rayan Tabit, an architecture studio East Architecture, as well as an engineering firm AKT of Hanif Kara. So those are the 7, let's say, categories that all fall under وما بينهما. But Dr. Julian, as well as the other artistic directors, have really done a lot to bring all of these soft concepts, really, to make for a much greater whole Biennale. So
Maybe we can start with Al-Bidayah.
Sorry, maybe start with what?
With Al-Bidayah.
Al-Bidayah. Well, actually, before that, I'd just like to say that you mentioned the other artistic directors. So, I have to channel them as well, because basically, I would say we were the 4 musketeers. There were the 3 artistic directors, myself, Amin Jafar, and Abdurrahman Azam, and then the D'Artagnan was Mohamed Shono, the curator of contemporary art. And we worked really as a team in trying to think out the overall concept. Then we worked on our individual sections, but always in reference, and really always in reference to Mohamed as well and his extraordinary team for the contemporary. So the fact that I'm the only one here is, I'm the tip of the iceberg.
Sure, of course.
Huge amount underneath it. So we can't really start with Al-Bidayah without picking up on what His Excellency mentioned just a moment ago. What is the title of the entire Biennale? It's وَمَا بَيْنَهُمَا, a phrase that it is impossible to think of without reference to the fact that it appears 19 times in the Quran, prefaced by the heavens and the earth. And it's that sense of moving from considerations of, I'll call it the heavenly, to our position on the earth and our relationship to that has actually informed how we've addressed not just single parts, but the sequence. So Al-Bidayah looks at the sacred. How do we look at sacred objects? How do we react to them? And here, this is something utterly exceptional, because only here could we have this gathering of objects that would make such an extraordinary resonance for all Muslims. And so we start with the Holy Word, the Word of God, and items connected to the Kaaba itself. But all of the examples of the Quran that we have are from Medina. So they're sacred in nature and sacred by association. And then we have something that, Rakan, this is just utterly extraordinary what you and the foundation have managed to bring here, which is not just a fragment, one part of the Kiswa, but 4 entire panels representing the full covering dress of the Kaaba. And it's not surprising then that Muslim visitors are extraordinarily touched. But I think what's also been a feature of what we've seen over the last few days is how non-Muslims have been you know, you just go into this room and it's something quite extraordinary. And so that, in a way, I'm lost for words about what it is. And that takes us to what the second part of ALBIDAYAH is trying to do, which is not look at the sacred in objects, but what is the indescribable, the sacred beyond objects. And here we see the kind of amazing power of the concept of this Biennale to bring together historic objects and contemporary, because it's the contemporary artists who, in the first phase after the Kiswa room, reflect on how Muslims react to the majesty of that's implicit in the that's projected by the Kiswa. And of course it's humility and prayer. But then there are further rooms that look at, that make us think about what is that inestimable power that we can't describe, we can't even really comprehend.
Yeah.
And here we've got some amazing installations.
Absolutely.
I mean, they're intended to make you feel small, confused, I'll say dazed and confused, and I think they work exceptionally well. But if there's that element of power, it's followed at the end by that element of, I'll call it mercy and light, in a beautiful installation that looks at the illumination from the Quran in a extraordinary creation, a glass Quran, where it's not just reflected light, the light comes right through every single 77,000 words of the Quran.
Yeah.
So,
and I think, I mean, what Julian is so eloquently describing essentially is also capturing something very important that, as a person who's been following sort of the curatorial process that has gone into this for the last 2 years, essentially in ALBIDAYAH, what you have is finally an exhibition that is bringing the intangible into the experience so centrally. We can get very comfortable at looking at beautiful things to the degree that their beauty kind of starts, you get used to it. The intangible and how the artistic directors and curators have brought these really emotion eliciting almost experiences for a Muslim or a non-Muslim alike, in a way. There may be different emotions, but they are similarly feelings of wonder or amazement or sensing that there is something special. Really is something that I feel has worked very well. We want to strive to that feeling, because that is much like when we were talking about this Hajj terminal building and what is this energy in a way that is within it, that you feel that in every day. And I think one of the really clever devices employed by Dr. Julian, Amin, and Dr. Abdurrahman and Muhammad was, as you walk through ALBIDAYAH, if you read a lot of the text panels describing what you're seeing, you always have this very interesting tether, we call them in our processes tether, of a particular verse from the Quran that really will sort of imbue you with a sense of what are you seeing here in a much grander idea than just the artisanal or craft work of a particular object, or even something as in front of very immense things, as small as the concept by a single artist. So the whole then becomes much greater than the sum of the parts for the experience.
You know, Dr. Julian, I heard you say this many times. We were walking around the exhibition and you kept on saying, both to me as other people, do not focus on any single object. Think about the entire holistic feeling. How do you think about that? Why do you, maybe the easiest way of saying this question is, why did you keep on saying that? That idea of this is a entire feeling, maybe this is an entire concept. This is about something much bigger than the beauty of a single object. Why is that so important for you, for the team, and for people who are coming to see the work?
So I suppose it goes back to a fundamental question about what are exhibitions best able to do.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, you can have that surprising new bit of information. You can have a flash of insight, you know. But above all, it seems to me that we're in a three-dimensional space that can become not just a somatic experience, but an emotional experience of the highest intensity. And if you can achieve that in an exhibition, the information and the insights will stay with you. That feeling will stay with you. And it's very, very difficult in many traditional museums to do that because you're hemmed in by the building. And here, I'll call it a canvas, the spaces, and the commitment from DBF to allow us to create a journey where the sonography is eliciting emotion as much as the objects themselves. It's that extraordinary relationship between object and setting that I think heightens the emotions, and it's a chance, it's an opportunity that is very, very rare. And I have to say,
and if I may, I think, you know, I hope we get to talk about this even as we discuss ALMADAR and the other sections of the Biennale.
Yeah.
If I may, Dr. Julian, and add what perhaps hems in museums goes beyond just physical space. There is a level of new and innovative thinking about how do we approach an Islamic exhibition that we've undertaken here. And Dr. Julian was a central part as well of the artistic direction and curation of the first edition. So it's almost DBF family in many ways. That really is about how do we approach this subject. So not to sort of go into too much depth at this stage, but Islamic Arts Biennale is the title of this with an S. We have sort of opened up as much as possible, both for diversity of disciplines, diversity of regions and geographic representation, obviously also diversity of mediums and formats, as well as chronological diversity, which is central to how we want to think about this Biennale and what does it show to the world. To what end or why do we want to do that? There are many reasons, but I'll speak from at least a perspective that I have that is personal, which is how can I say, but in some ways reductive, that may be too strong of a word, but simple and conceptions of how should an Islamic museum or an Islamic art exhibition look have been kind of static for a fair amount of time, really as a result of a certain narrative that has been built for a number of decades or maybe a century and a half. And what excites me about this Biennale and about what we can unleash is a total rethink of how do you build the narratives. There is no pursuit in this Biennale nor false sort of ideas about comprehensiveness. Because the topic and the subjects that you can approach and think about and try to build stories almost about, and feelings and emotions around Islamic arts, culture, creativity are too vast.
Yeah, comprehensiveness around Islam, like
Exactly.
Islamic arts, that idea.
It's almost impossible.
It's a fool's errand.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And in an interesting way, there is something so unified and there is so much unity in Islam, yet there is unbounded diversity.
Yeah.
And And how do you approach that with a delicate way, with nuance, and with an idea that, you know, in every edition or within every gallery, we're almost tackling this from another perspective, opening a window to look at this from a lens that's new and different, not just to be new, but to offer people a chance to see an example of how can you think different.
Yeah.
I think that ultimately will be something I hope is a mark of impact and success if people come and leave with those refreshed ideas about building their points of view about Islamic arts in general.
So you recall I said that there's a dual dynamic here.
Yeah.
So in describing ALBIDAYAH, I suppose it's that first great force of being so close to Mecca and Medina. But that we talked about the diversity, this extraordinary influx and efflux of people through these lands. That's wonderfully represented in the ALMADAR section, where it's not just the objects, it's not just the concepts, it's actually the very participation itself is an expression of that. So there are, excuse me, what sounds like a flippant phrase, but it's participants from Mali to Bali. It's absolutely, it's staggering. It's 34 institutions, and institutions that will surprise some people. So
And would surprise each other.
you've got it absolutely. Yeah. Can I just?
Yeah, it was just that special nature by which these encounters have happened in this year for me is the marked improvement in what ALMADAR is.
Yeah.
And really is offering a sign of potential of where we can go. But please.
No, I was just recalling when you mentioned that, Mikey, that we had a meeting in Riyadh in February.
Yep.
And I came into the room, and at one end of the table, we had colleagues from Mali, colleagues from Indonesia, and colleagues from the Vatican, all in their dress, very sort of, and having the most intense, wonderful conversation. And I thought, goodness me, this is a dynamic.
That sounds like a podcast episode. That sounds like a great podcast episode. Yeah. Sorry.
Just, and you could kind of feel the excitement. So, Abdurrahman, who kind of really helped mastermind this second section, ALMADAR, looking at concepts that go from like the concept of zero, the introduction of zero, that takes us from Hindu India through the Muslim lands to actually a very obstinate Catholic Europe. This is a journey. I mean, I could imagine someone bringing students from the university just to sit at that, what they call an island, in a kind of circle, to talk about what this means.
Yeah.
So they're not obvious concepts for an exhibition like this, but they're ones that we should all address. We would have no computers without algorithms. It's the 1 and 0. So there's something extraordinary that they've tackled, but it's also what we've tried to do is to look at relationships between these different sections.
Yeah.
So ALBIDAYAH, we tend to think of as how do we comprehend the creation around us through our hearts? How do we then try to comprehend the heavens above us and the earth and the sea through numbers, through thinking? And then in this extraordinary ALMUQTANI section with 2 extraordinary collections, we're looking at creation with a hand. So it's heart, mind, hand, feeling, thinking, making.
Yeah.
And that's, I hope not preachy, but I hope it's a way of that people can comprehend the diversity of what has been presented.
And I love, for me, these encounters and the sessions that happened as the workshops for placing the objects in Al-Madar and the discoveries that are happening between institutions. I mentioned Al-Madar being this convening moment and idea that can go far beyond nice things in display cases in a beautiful gallery.
Yeah.
And the discoveries that are happening between institutions take me back again to this parallel with the role of Hajj and the role of it's not what has been maintaining this almost unity within Islam, but as well as opening the diversity. What better example to think of than Mecca itself every year, breathing in almost the Muslim world as a whole, having them interact, and these interactions affecting people as they take back whatever they had in Mecca back to their own sort of wherever their own lands came from and so on, enriched by these encounters, but also maintaining a connection in a way to something central. And Al-Madar has, this potential to be something very, very special for institutions that are interested in Islamic arts and culture and history, but it also has an amazing potential to be where we seriously challenge any of these narratives that I kind of alluded to earlier.
Yeah.
150 years or 100 or 180 years of looking at things in this siloed way. I will never forget the distinction that Dr. Julian and I spoke about 3 years ago, and it's really when a lot of Islamic cultural objects and antiquities and beautiful things and manuscripts went to these places that have taken care of them in Europe or in other places around the world. The key thing that happened was this forced distinction between what is written on a manuscript and what is made by the hand of an artisan. So if you imagine Al-Tusi, the astronomer's manuscript, as well as the astrolabe that he had procured or commissioned. The astrolabe went to the decorative arts section of a university or a cultural institution somewhere. And that manuscript went to the National Library.
Yeah.
So you stopped looking at these things holistically.
As part of the same thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And what you have now is a reunification almost of the thought of somebody like Al-Tusi, but you also have it encountering the Copernicus first edition that Al-Tusi's astronomic findings informed in a big way around Copernicus, intellectual pursuits of heliocentricity and so on. But you go more than that and you say, what more discoveries can be made by just bringing people together?
Yeah, it's like it's been disassembled and sold for parts for so many years, and now it's been reassembled, and it's like, look at it.
That's so much more than the parts.
So I want to come back to this idea of inhaling and exhaling and convening. There is a responsibility associated with that, taking that job, taking that mantle and say, okay, I want to convene all these institutions from around the world. I want to literally create a space, this open space, and say, "Ahlo sahlo, please come here." I want to talk a little bit about that responsibility and how the team has internally thought about that, about taking it on and actually having it affect the way you think about your job. Maybe we can start with you.
I will have a lot of I have a lot to say about Dr. Abdurrahman Azzam specifically, who was instrumental in building the relationships for Al-Madar, who has really been both an artistic director and a diplomat.
Yes.
In many ways.
Yeah.
In how he has really talked to a lot of these institutions with a very, very open, really open heart about how do they see their own participation. We've welcomed people who are participants to really generate their own ideas in what do they want to show.
Yeah.
There is a theme around the Al-Madar, but it was quite flexible and flowing enough to allow for people to tell their own stories. And I think more importantly is that what we've found that the Diriyah Biennale Foundation and this team has been working with a lot of these institutions, both to conserve, restore a lot of these objects that have come here. For example, some of the maps that are on display were not in the best state, but we worked together to bring them in. And further, it's now what we are discussing around, again, with all these new discoveries, we keep finding ways where the legacy goes beyond an exhibition that is on display for 4 months, but there are significant possibilities to do joint research and to do collaborative work together. One example is this madraj, which is in the first room of ALBIDAYAH. So the madraj is in the staircase, which Dr. Julian so beautifully sort of can describe and has placed within the scenography of that first gallery. This is what is it, Dr. Julian? How many centuries? When was it made?
1824.
So 1824 wooden staircase from a Nawab in India.
It's one of the first things you see upon
First
entry.
things you see when you enter.
Yeah.
And it's an Indian object in origin that was a staircase for the ascension into the Kaaba in cleaning and processions and so on, used all the way through, even by many of Saudi Arabia's late kings. But through this project and some of Dr. Julian's research teams and supporting curators have started to dig up manifests of East India Company ships that really count the wood that was used to make this madraj.
Wow.
And we're going to engage now in further.
100 pages
Wow.
of documents relating to this madraj. So, yeah, very, very, very exciting.
This makes me so excited about the idea of being open for where can it all go.
Yeah.
And not only where can it go as an exhibition,
Yeah.
but where can it go as a platform for
Yes.
collaboration and discovery, and even a platform to just satisfy all our curiosities, frankly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, even the responsibility of working with the institutions, but the responsibility of having so many visitors from around the world, residents of Jeddah,
Exactly.
right? Like residents of Jeddah who are affected, and really, this will shape their year. It may shape their decade. It may shape the way they think of themselves as global citizens. That's a huge responsibility. I'm curious, maybe Dr. Julian, maybe you're a great person to talk about this. How did you think about that responsibility? You're coming here. How did you think about your responsibility to the city of Jeddah, as well as to the global community?
I think I had the fortune of having the experience last time, and talking to friends in Jeddah about the way that their children or grandchildren didn't just visit here once, 5, 6, 7 times.
It's beautiful.
And they would come to look at something, not try to march through everything in one go, but maybe to look at a group of contemporary art objects under this canopy. And then they would go to, I'll call it the piazza, where around the pool, and it was often a family occasion, but the place offers a kind of freedom to explore, but also a place to just enjoy. What I didn't see last time was how it works during Ramadan, when it opens at 8 and closes at 3:30 in the morning. But, friends were telling me it was wonderful. So I hope I'll see it this year. I think it generated more than curiosity. It generated a sense of excitement and pride. And I really do hope that that's reflected here this time. It's been, the place is so extraordinary. I'm just overlooking the gardens here, and these are gardens that have been created as part of the contemporary art installations around the theme of the garden, to make us reflect on how Rehan, for example, is often something that brings back intense memories because of its, the smells.
Yeah.
Or our responsibility to make sure that nature is preserved and protected. So these are absolutely key themes that will resonate with people for whom maybe the concept of zero is not or Copernicus is not so interesting. So I think it's the interest of individual things, but it's somehow the overall is an amazing experience and it kind of entices you back. So I expect many people in Jeddah to come back many times. And if the food is good, they'll come back even more times.
Yeah. Well, I think beyond just Jeddah, for Saudi Arabia as a whole, there are significant visitors that we expect to come to this edition.
Yeah.
Our first edition had over 600,000 visitors, which, if you take it on sort of daily visitors, puts it as one of, if not the most visited Biennale in the world, certainly of its year. So we're expecting large number of visitors. Of course, the local community in Jeddah making it this place where they come together, where their families come and experience some of what's on offer in the programs that are for children, or obviously the dining options and so on, and making it a place of really a meeting point for the city.
Yeah.
Despite it being a little bit removed outside the center, but still a very accessible place. Travelers from within Saudi Arabia and also visitors to Saudi as the country is growing its sort of tourism profile also visit. And a big part of the tourism profile, if not exclusively, but certainly for Jeddah as the gateway to Mecca, is the pilgrims. So Ramadan is peak Umrah, obviously a season. And what we had 2 years ago, when the whole month of Ramadan was part of the overlapped with the Biennale, so will it in this second edition, is a dedicated program for Umrah tour operators to bring groups into this Biennale, each with the different designs for the visitor journey, for the Indonesian groups or for the groups coming from other parts of the world, where we work literally with the tour operators to say, here's everything that's on offer. We realize that a lot of pilgrims are tired and maybe they can't go through everything. What would you like us to focus on? What do you think your audience is interested in? And we try to do that. And I have to say that one of the most touching and powerful moments for me in the first edition was looking at pilgrims arriving in their ihrams before even going to Mecca, because the airport where they land is actually just across the streets, and walking through the galleries. A lot of them are elderly, many are on wheelchairs, and it's a hugely moving thing to see.
Can I ask about the contemporary portion? It's specifically related to the pilgrims. Because to me, which if you're watching, this outdoor space is almost entirely the contemporary portion. You can see some of the other galleries in the background, but basically everything you're seeing in the background is the work of contemporary artists. It's the most prominent, obvious thing you see, the first thing you see. To me as a visitor, and maybe I'm not getting the right message, but maybe there's other messages to get. To me as a visitor, the implication is you are a part of this history. This history is now. You meet the artists. They are alive and well. They look like you. They are of your generation, they are of this moment, and they are part of the civilization. They are part of this world of arts. They are contributing to it, just as Ibn Tusi, right? I wonder, what do you think the effect was on the pilgrims or other visitors? And am I picking up on the wrong message, or is there a different message that you're trying to send by including contemporary arts in a Biennale that has Ibn Tusi and all these other folks?
No, please.
Yeah. So, contemporary, the inclusion of contemporary art in this Biennale is something, especially around the opening week, is a question and a topic that keeps coming up. And there's there's a very sort of level one way to address this, but I think if you allow me, I'd like to spend time on that, but maybe go a little bit deeper.
Please.
So, a biennale is supposed to be, and this one certainly, is, like I said, offering every time a fresh look and a fresh way to build a narrative and discuss a certain point of view around Islamic culture and Islamic arts. So you can't do that by only looking towards something in the past. And the only thing you would do by that is exacerbate some of what I've spoken about earlier. Ideas around a particular golden age of Islam, focusing centrally on only particular, let's say, hotspots of Islamic history where there was a lot of
Yeah.
So both diversity in time, as I mentioned, but diversity in geographies and so on. And by the way, some of the contemporary artists are not even from the Muslim world that are working with us, but they have interacted in a way with this culture in some way.
No, but
So that's the simple level one answer, which is we need to have current and contemporary artistic and creative expression within this in order to build these new narratives. But if we even go a little bit, and I said this in one of our discussions around the opening day, the word contemporary, when it comes to art, kind of has gotten this association to mean sort of capital C, contemporary, post-war American. But if you look at contemporary just as it means of its time, I see no real distinction between the architect and designer in Cordoba building and designing a beautiful muqarnas structure using inspiration he had or she at that time from their own past, from their context where they live, and using the best technologies and devices of the day. And you can't really distinguish. That person was a contemporary artist or contemporary creative of their time. So is one of our Saudi artists, for example, Dana Awartani. Dana, who is inspired very much by Islamic geometric patterns and so on, but uses very different devices and technologies and ways to put her concepts forward that are relevant for today. Both are Islamic artists, if you will. Both were contemporary artists in their time, employing forward-thinking ideas about what are they producing creatively.
Yeah.
So this cut-off of ancient and contemporary, for me, seems a bit, frankly, even violent to say that what we have on here is ancient, then we're cut, and just contemporary, but rather it is all part of traditions and ideas that live through centuries, but are beyond even Islamic arts. I think are normal across all creative disciplines, whether they are Islamic or not.
yes.
It's literally all that is in
All
between.
in between. I'm sorry, Dr. Julian.
No, that was I think I said right at the beginning that certainly for ALBIDAYAH, it's inconceivable that you could talk about the sacred beyond objects if you restricted yourself only to historical objects. It's precisely the contribution of contemporary artists who are not there to describe, they are there to provoke us to think and react. So I think that the reaction we had a lot in the first Biennale, and we sometimes get now, is why do you have kind of old and new together? I mean, and what you just described is a dynamic that tries to break that sense of classification, codification, and actually a kind of really sterile approach. So I feel there's an opportunity here to start testing the interaction. So in the pavilions, we have contemporary artist whose work has actually never been seen, as he says. So it's this extraordinary work called magnetism, as it were, something that represents the Kaaba with iron filings that move in front of a sitara, a curtain from the Kaaba. It's a combination that is something more than the work on its own. I can say that because that's what he said to me.
Yeah.
And
I have to quote Julian Raby here. It is not gratuitous juxtaposition. I love that expression because it's true. It's not, let's just be
Different.
fun
just to be different.
and put Ahmed Matar next to a Kaaba sitara. There is there's a purpose and an idea to bring this, not juxtaposition, but to bring this conversation and elicit this reaction and emotion from
Because it's not that they're different, it's that they're similar.
in many ways.
Yeah.
and you know, another example from the Medina Pavilion, we have historic objects, but right in the center is a modern work that actually draws on an extraordinary woodworking tradition, really, that's very special in this region, and creates a light with shadows on the ground that picks up on the theme that's implicit in the title of the city and the pavilion, the illuminated, Al-Munawwara. So these are kind of, it's a very, very gentle, it's not a confrontation, it's a kind of harmony there. But this Biennale is a place that could accept confrontation very easily. And that's what I love about it. It's that this openness.
Amazing.
So
Okay, before we wrap up, I want to ask one last question about continuity and success. We're at the beginning of the opening, the beginning of the Biennale. From your perspectives, Your Excellency, maybe we'll start with you. What does success look like? I mean, how do you guys think about hosting a successful Biennale for the next few months, but also beyond that?
Yeah, well, success is certainly, we have, as with any other sort of endeavor, we have some objectives and targets in terms of how many people will visit, how will engagement look like, and that's very important. And I'm quite confident that that will happen. And I think on a national level within Saudi Arabia, what we had in the first edition and then hopefully continues now and going forward is instilling this sense of pride and almost feeling like we've built something that is really reaching the world with a message that is coming from a point of view that we have here. A point of view that we've constructed, obviously, with the help of so many participating people and institutions from around the world.
Yeah.
But on a global level, really, for the Biennale as a whole, I go back to where we started. Our intention is to provoke new ideas and new thinking about how do you build narratives about Islamic arts and culture. And I think really success for me is starting to, I see signs of, especially from communities who are active in museums and studies around this topic, really going back with a new way of thinking. So the objective is not to make people think like us, but to just provoke them to think.
Amazing. Beautiful.
So I remember last time there were two professors of Islamic art who came from the States, and they said, both of them independently, we're going to start teaching things in a different way. And that gives you the sense that maybe what we're trying to do here is going to have a resonance. But above all, I really think about the resonance for I'll call you the non-professional. And this morning, a lady I'd never seen before said in the lift, she said, "Thank you very much for the Biennale. I think it will change a lot of people's lives." And then she said, "It certainly changed mine." I would have liked to have asked her how, but I was getting off on floor 2 and she was going to floor 3. So I'm left with a wonderfully tantalizing picture of this having a really deep effect. So, but I think there's a huge and very easy way in which it can have an effect, and that's through this network of ALMADAR, this essentially building a community of like-minded institutions in a field that really lacks leadership. And I think what you're doing is
Amazing.
really helping bring people together.
Well, I want to thank you both for being a part of this. It's a huge honor to be here for the opening, to host you both. And this is the first of many conversations that we're doing about the Islamic Arts Biennale this year, focusing on ALMADAR. Alf Mabruk, thank you so much. And I hope the afikra community comes to Jeddah to experience this in person. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mikey.
Thank you, Mikey.